Chapter 1. The Whispering Shadows. Have you ever felt something watching you, even when you're alone? Something that whispers your name when no one else is around? Amelia did, and it was the beginning of her nightmare. Amelia moved into the quiet town of Ravenwood with her family, unaware that this seemingly peaceful place would soon become the source of her darkest fears. The house they moved into had an old-world charm, its creaky wooden floors and dusty corners making it feel abandoned, like it had a secret buried deep within its walls. From the moment Amelia stepped into her new room, the whispers began. At first, it was nothing more than a faint rustle in the air, so soft, so subtle that she thought it was just the house settling. But then, the whispers grew louder, more insistent, calling her name. Amelia? Night after night, the voice grew clearer, until one night, it wasn't just a whisper in the wind. It was inside her mind, a voice that seemed to know her deepest fears. It wasn't just a random sound. The voice was calling to her. It was in the house, and it had been there long before she arrived. Amelia tried to ignore it, but the darkness in the room pressed in on her. The air was thick with an unspoken weight. Every time she tried to sleep, the whispers would begin again, creeping into her dreams. Chapter 2. The Strange Presence. What if the darkness in your home wasn't just your imagination? What if it was something far worse? Amelia's first encounter with the entity was only the beginning of her nightmare. Days passed, and the whispers turned into something more sinister. It was no longer just a voice in the dark. Now Amelia could feel it, something moving in the shadows. Her room, once a place of comfort, became a prison, the walls closing in on her. It wasn't just a presence, it was alive. One night, she woke to find herself unable to move. It felt as if invisible hands were holding her in place, pinning her to the bed. She could hear the soft breathing of something, or someone, right next to her. And yet, when she turned, no one was there. The air grew colder, and Amelia felt an overwhelming sense of dread. A sharp, painful whisper echoed through the room. "I am here. You belong to me now." This time, the voice was not in her head. It was real. The entity had come for her. Amelia struggled, but she couldn't break free. In that moment, she realized that the house was not just haunted, it was a prison, and she was its prisoner. Chapter 3. The Nightmares Begin. What if you couldn't escape your own dreams? Amelia's nightmares became her waking reality, and the line between them began to blur. As the days went on, Amelia's sleep became increasingly disturbed. The dreams were no longer random. They were violent, vivid, and they felt real. In her dreams, she stood in an ancient, abandoned forest, the trees looming like twisted sentinels. The ground beneath her feet seemed to pulse with life. In the distance, a figure appeared, tall, shadowy, with glowing red eyes. It called to her, beckoning her forward. "Come to me, Amelia. You are mine." Every time she reached out to touch the figure, the dream shifted, the ground falling away beneath her feet. She would wake up, gasping for air, drenched in sweat, only to realize that the figure was still with her, its presence lingering in the dark corners of her room. No matter how hard Amelia tried to push the nightmares away, they continued to torment her, growing more vivid and powerful with each passing night. The entity wasn't just watching her, it was feeding on her fear, becoming stronger with every dream. Sorcerer Chapter 5. The Descent into Madness. Amelia couldn't escape the entity, not even in her own mind. Her thoughts were no longer her own. The voice of the entity echoed in her head, always whispering, always there. She no longer knew where the entity ended, and she began. She stopped talking to her friends, stopped seeing her family. Her parents were concerned, but they didn't understand. How could they? They hadn't heard the whispers or felt the cold touch of the entity following them. The entity's influence over her mind grew stronger. It began to feed on her fear, twisting her thoughts until she no longer trusted her own perceptions. Her once warm, familiar home felt alien to her, like a cold, hostile place where she was trapped, a place she no longer recognized. Chapter 6. The Truth in the Cabin. Amelia couldn't escape the pull of the entity. The whispers led her to the old cabin deep in the woods, the one her parents had warned her about. Her friends had told her to stay away from it, but the entity wanted her to go there. It was calling her. When Amelia entered the cabin, the darkness in the air felt suffocating. The walls seemed to breathe with life. She felt a chill run through her as she stepped deeper into the cabin's heart, her heartbeat pounding in her chest. Inside, she found an old chest. When she opened it, there were letters, ancient, brittle, and written in a language she didn't understand. But the message was clear. The entity had claimed her, bound her to the land, and it wasn't going to let her go. The letter spoke of a ritual, an ancient force that fed on fear, binding itself to the soul of the one it chose. Amelia was trapped. There was no escaping the entity's grasp. Chapter 7. The Unseen Terror. The whispers were no longer confined to the house. They followed Amelia everywhere, at school, in the halls, at the bus stop. The entity was everywhere. It was always watching, always whispering. Amelia couldn't sleep anymore. The figure from her nightmares followed her into her waking life. It would appear in mirrors, in the shadows of her room, its eyes glowing with a sinister hunger. No matter where she went, it was always there, waiting for her. She started to doubt her own mind. The boundaries between reality and nightmare blurred. Was she going mad, or was the entity truly real? No one else seemed to see it, but Amelia knew. It was real, and it was coming for her. Chapter 8. The Final Confrontation. Amelia couldn't take it anymore. She had to confront the entity. She ventured back into the cabin one final time, determined to face whatever lay inside. As she stepped into the heart of the cabin, she felt the presence wash over her, colder and darker than ever before. The entity appeared before her, its true form, an abomination of shadow and flame, a figure that twisted and writhed in the dark. It was no longer just a voice in her head. It was there, standing before her, hungry for her soul. "You cannot escape me," the entity hissed. "You are mine." Amelia's heart pounded as she faced the entity. She didn't know if she could survive this, but she knew that if she didn't fight back now, she would be lost forever. Chapter 9. The End or the Beginning. In the final battle, Amelia fought for her life. She screamed, she fought, but the entity's power was too strong. With one last desperate cry, the entity claimed her. The cabin was quiet once more, but the whispers never stopped. Conclusion: do you believe in the things that hide in the dark? The things that whisper your name when you're alone? Share your story. Tell us what haunts you before it's too late.